This is a presentation on the writing process, and I subtitle it "So You Want to Write an Essay," because it will give you some pointers to follow if you have an idea or a basic topic and you want to develop it into a final draft. And if you follow this process, that's exactly what you'll have. The writing process itself, uh, many people will give you different definitions of what's all included in the writing process, what components. These are the ones that I think are the most important. These are the ones that will help you as you develop and take you from stage to stage from a basic idea into a full-blown essay. And those stages are the planning and idea development stage, pre-writing, organizing, drafting, revising, and editing. And if you can complete all of these, and we'll talk about them in detail, if you complete all of these, you can move from that simple idea or basic topic into your final draft. What do I mean by the planning and idea development stage? This is sort of like the cooking stage, and I call it cooking because anytime you have a topic or an idea, or you have you've got to write something, there's always going to be a time before you start putting pen to paper or your fingers to the keyboard. You're going to have some cooking time, some thinking time, and it varies for everybody. It takes various amounts of time. Now, if you have a timed writing assignment, the time is a lot less for you. You're under the gun. There's more of a crunch, and you have to think on your feet. You have to think a lot faster. However, when you have more time, if you know what essays due in 3 weeks, your first paper's due in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whenever, you have some time from the time you know that the essay is going to be due up until you have to start writing it. You have some time to think on it and try to imagine what you're going to write about. Everyone has their own idea development rituals. Some people like to exercise, and while they're exercising, they can think and their brain's clear and their mind, they can focus on what they want to do, and some ideas come to them. Some people take naps, and while they're napping, their brain's relaxing, and when they wake up or just before they go to sleep, they have a good idea. Some people may need to take a shower, and while they're in the shower, they're focusing on new ideas and thinking of what can be done. It's different for everyone. People have different ways of doing that. Some people need to go to a museum and look at art. Whatever you need to do, take the time to do that. Take the time to exercise a little bit or get the endorphins running, and just allow your mind to think. Just try to develop. What do I want to talk about? What are the things I want to discuss? How can I make a unique approach to this topic? Anything that works for you should be good and develop well. The ideas that you have. The problem with this, or the only warning for this, is just know your limits and know your deadlines. You can't spend all of your time planning and developing ideas. You need to set aside a specific amount of time, and it needs to be small in proportion to everything else that you're doing. You don't want to spend, if your paper's due in 3 weeks, you don't want to spend, 2 weeks and 6 days planning an idea development and then the rest of the time following the other stages. That's not going to work for you. But give yourself enough time to develop the ideas or have that cooking stage of what you want to do. Once you've sort of got an idea of the direction you want to take, you can pre-write. Or if you found that you haven't really been able to develop any ideas, pre-writing can help you get there as well. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do pre-writing, but it should always be a simple and carefree way to get your ideas on paper. Pre-writing is not something that you're going to turn in for a grade. So you need to write freely, and you need not worry about grammar errors or relevance to the topic, because sometimes when we pre-write, it has nothing to do with the topic at hand, has nothing to do with the assignment we've been given. Sometimes we need to just sort of flush things out of our brain, things that get clogged up in there. You need to just move them out, and the best way to do that is just putting pen to paper and just writing down your ideas, writing down your thoughts, even if they don't seem to relate, because sometimes we just need to move those ideas out of our head to get new ideas in, and sometimes we just need to write things down that we don't think are relevant, and we find some relevance as we begin writing the formal essay, doing the drafting. But pre-writing is designed to jumpstart your brain, and it will generate some ideas. If you're unsure about pre-writing, we're going to talk a little bit more about some examples of pre-writing, but if you want some more ideas about pre-writing or the writing process in general, I would suggest looking at Peter Elbow's book called Writing with Power. It's a very small, simple book, and you can turn right to the page that you're looking for. He has it broken down into all the stages of writing, of the writing process, and he gives some really good ideas, tips, hints that you can follow to get your brain working in the right direction for a good paper. There are a bunch of types of pre-writing. I'm going to talk about just a few of them, and different people use different ones. Some people use exclusively one type of pre-write because that's the thing that helps them. Other people, may use various types depending on the situation that they're in. Free writing is one of the most common types of pre-writing, and that's a timed writing assignment and I prefer it to be a handwritten assignment as opposed to typing on the screen or typing on a keyboard. It's where you put a pen down or put a pencil down to the paper and you say, I'm going to write for 5 minutes without stopping, and whatever comes out of my mind, whatever comes off my pen, that's what's going to be there. There's no control to it. There's no, you're not trying to force a topic. It's just whatever's in your brain. You may start writing out something about the topic at hand, but when your brain goes blank, you don't stop writing. You just start. If you just write nothing else, you write nothing, 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 nothing until the next idea pops into your head. But no matter what you do, you don't stop writing for the time limit that you set for yourself. And I would say normally set yourself anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes, depending on the time that you have and what you need to do. Because a lot of times you'll run into some really good ideas. This is a good pre-write format to begin with if you don't have a solid idea or a solid plan. Excuse me. And sometimes if you do have a plan, this can help unleash some of the ideas that are locked up in your brain that can't free themselves regularly. You'll be surprised what you'll discover from doing a pre-write or doing this free writing exercise. If nothing's coming to your brain, like I said, you write nothing. If you're worried or you have your grocery list on your mind, write out your grocery list, but just don't take your pen off the paper. You just keep writing no matter what. And then if a new idea drops in, just break off of the idea you're talking about and go into the next one. You'll be amazed what you find out from that. Listing is another good exercise for pre-writing, and sometimes people just need to jot down on a piece of paper, okay, I know I want to talk about this, I want to talk about this, I want to cover that, I want to cover this. That's a basic list. It doesn't have to be formal. Pre-writing is for you. It's not something that's going to be looked at and graded other than, you may have professors who say, I just want to see that you have pre-written, I want to see some pre-writing. But for the most part, the pre-writing is for you, so it's whatever ritual or whatever need you have to get some ideas down to help you generate good ideas for your paper. Sometimes you just need to jot down ideas. Listing might be too ordered for you or organized. At times I have a scratch sheet of paper, a pile of scratch sheets of paper on my desk. I'll just pick one up and just start jotting down different ideas in no particular order, but just jotting things down because these are things I want to discuss. Another format is called clustering. I've heard people call it a mind tree or a mind map, and we're going to look at that in the next slide. But clustering is another good form of pre-writing. When we cluster, we want to begin, say if we have a general topic, sports, and we put a circle around that. And then we start drawing extensions off from that main circle. We build other circles, and then we put words inside of that. So maybe, I don't know what I'm going to put in this other circle, but then I realize, okay, here's the Olympics is one sport I may use. And then I go back to the other one and I say, oh, well, tennis is another sport. What can I think from tennis? And if you don't know anything, just keep drawing circles and extensions until you think of words to go in there. Serena Williams plays tennis. Wimbledon is a tennis event, so that may be useful. Then draw another main circle from sports and think about, okay, baseball. I may go back to Olympics and think, okay, Michael Phelps, he was an Olympian. And so as you move through, you'll develop all of these different ideas, and then you can go back and decide. It may be that you're writing an essay on sports in general, and all of these components can fit, but it may be that as you shoot off into various clusters, maybe my essay is going to be about tennis. If I look and see I have a few more circles drawn, a few more extensions from tennis than the others, so maybe my focus can be there. Or maybe it can be on the Olympics and Michael Phelps, and my essay may be on Michael Phelps entirely. But this should help you move your ideas from the brain stage onto the page. And the other thing to notice is if you write them in this format, then you have all the circles that, like you have sports that extends out to baseball, one extends to Olympics, one extends to tennis. And so it's almost like you're building sort of an organizational pattern as you go, because everything you extend off from the circle has some relationship to the circle that it's connected to. So it may help you when you get to an organizing stage. When we move to the organizing stage, you definitely need an organizing stage between pre-writing and drafting, because you need to start pulling the ideas together that you've developed in pre-writing. But organizing can appear at various stages within your writing, in the writing process, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The first part of the organizing is taking the ideas that you've developed within the pre-write and pulling them together and getting them into the right places. And what that means is you want to separate and arrange your information into like parts. components that match one another. You want to try to divide them up as best as possible. You can do that either by forming bulleted lists. Here's this was the main idea of this aspect, and here's all the other little things I've pre-written that will fall under that particular idea. Here's another idea. So that's one format. Another one is to make a formal or an informal outline. I'm not a big fan of outlines because they're a little too controlled for me, but some people have to have an outline form. And after you've done this pre-write, then you can move into outlining if that's what you need to do, and start moving information and material, things that seem to be like or things that seem to be related to one another. Then move those ideas into different components, into different places, so that you'll have them arranged and separated from the other parts that that have less of a relationship. Remember that the better you organize these ideas during the pre-writing, during the organization phase, that more easily you can shift this information into body paragraphs. Because essentially what you're doing by dividing up this pre-write is you're separating ideas and organizing it so that it can be built into and drafted into a body paragraph. That's all, because a paragraph's going to all be about one idea and unified. That's what you're doing here. You're pulling all those ideas together. And as I said earlier, organizing and reorganizing may occur at various stages. You may have to go back and reorganize as you draft. Even after you revise, you may realize there's some ideas that you want to change. You have to go back and change the order of things. So organizing happens all the time. It's something that you may have to go back and do repeatedly, but you definitely need an organization stage between pre-writing and drafting. Once we've finished our organization and we've got as much material as possible, everything's divided out, then we can start drafting, and it's going to help us draft our paragraphs. This is where you're going to convert that useful material from the pre-write and from the organization phase. The first draft, though, remember that it's only designed to work out the kinks and flaws in your plan. Don't write with the idea that I'm just going to write one draft and turn that in and that's going to be enough. Most colleges are more involved with the writing process than what they were even when I was in college, and that wasn't very long ago. And they want you to write at least one draft, sometimes two, sometimes three, before you turn in a final product. At this stage of the game, if you don't have a thesis statement, don't panic, because sometimes we don't have a thesis. Sometimes we just have a general idea, and that's all right during our drafting phase. That's where, during the writing process, is when we may develop the thesis that we want to use. Now, start taking and arranging the information and ideas into a logical order. In other words, you've already organized things. If you've done a good organization, you can start building your paragraphs. But then even within that, you may decide during the drafting phase, what I've planned to be that looks like it might be my third paragraph, that might actually be my introduction now. And what I thought was my conclusion, maybe that needs to be reworked into my second paragraph, my first body paragraph. So this is what I'm talking about. The organization phase keeps happening over and over again. You may also realize as you arrange these ideas that something doesn't work well and you want to throw it out altogether and you need a new component, which means you may have to go back and pre-write a little bit to develop the ideas for that new component. It's a very fluid, flexible process, the writing process, but these are just the stages you need to be aware of as you move through them. Again, grammar, spelling, diction, none of this matters here. Don't worry about perfection in the drafting stage. That's not what drafting's about. You need to focus less on this and focus more on the content and making sure that you're getting the content in the right order and that you're delivering the appropriate amount. Drafts, again, they're not meant to be perfect. We're not striving for perfection. The only time you want it to be as close to perfect as possible is when you get the final draft. But that's not what these stages are about. As you write, you're going to constantly change and shift information, and that's fine. Just be willing and know that you have to do that. Remember, it's paper or it's a screen. It's nothing that's chiseled in stone. You can always make changes. You can always go back and reorganize. You can always go back and pre-write again. Scrapping ideas is something that happens during the writing phase. Just because you write it doesn't mean it's going to be kept. And this is a question that I always get from students. How many drafts do I need to write before I submit my final draft, before I submit the final version to you? The answer to that is as many drafts as necessary. You have to write as much as you need to write to get to the most polished version of your essay possible. So for some people, they can write one draft and then go and make a few revisions and can turn it in and it looks great. For others, they may need 2 or 3 stages to take the draft through. The saddest thing about writing, and this is something that people don't realize all the time, is time and effort really don't mean a whole lot when it comes to the writing process or when it comes to writing and being a successful writer. Some people can work overnight, take a few hours, sit down and write, and spin out a masterpiece. Other people, it may take weeks or months or several days to keep writing and redrafting and honing in on a topic. You know, that's just the way life is. That's just the way writing is. So time and effort don't really mean anything. So you may need extra drafts to get to the most polished version of your writing. Once we've taken it through as many drafts as we think we need to get to the point where we think, okay, I think this is the final version that I want to submit. This is the final version that after I revise and edit, this will be the version I submit for a grade or submit for review. That's when you need to enter into your revising stage. But I would say you always need to take a break between that drafting and revising phase, because after you've drafted, your brain's tired, your brain's been working very hard to get all the ideas together. You need some time away. Your brain needs to rest. You need to have a little entertainment. You need to forget about it for a few minutes just so that you can come back with a fresh mind when you start to revise, because revising is a very important part of your drafting, or a very important part of the writing process. Now, revising does not mean editing. And before I even say that, with the taking the break, you know, go to the movies, call a friend, talk to a buddy, go do some exercise, you know, surf the internet, watch a movie, do whatever you need to do to kind of get your brain out of that mode of thinking about what's going on with my draft. The revision stage, you need more time to focus. You need to come back with a fresh mind, fresh idea. It doesn't mean editing. That means you're not checking for grammar, punctuation, spelling, surface errors. None of that stuff matters at this phase. That's the last thing you do. Revising means something entirely different. What you do in the revision stage, you need to review your draft carefully and with a critical eye. And if you've distanced yourself from the draft for a little bit and you come back to it, well, you have that fresh eye and you can read it critically. Consider, as you read during the revision stage, consider how your audience will respond. We've talked a lot about in the other presentations how important audience is. And if you know the audience you're directing this to, then you should read as though you're a member of that audience and try to find points that, you know, how will this be received? How will an audience that I'm gearing this toward, how will an audience member accept this or receive this? And tailor it. You may need to tweak your draft so that it conforms more to the expectations of an audience. Check your claims. Ensure that all of the support and evidence that you provided is enough. Make sure that you've given enough information for everything. Make sure your topic sentences are well defended or supported. This is a stage where you do that, where you say, oh, maybe I need to go back and do a little more research. That's what the revising stage is about. Also, you need to consider your stake in the writing. And what I mean by that is that sometimes after we've written something, we go back and look at it and it's not exactly the product that we wanted to start out with. And sometimes that's okay and sometimes it's not. Maybe after we read it, we realize our view has changed. And if our view has changed dramatically and we're passionate about the topic we're discussing, then we may have to go back and tweak what we've said. If our view, or maybe the essay doesn't really fully present the viewpoint that we have intended. So then we have to go back and tweak for that as well. You also want to make sure that your thesis statement matches the details and the content that the body paragraphs convey. If your body paragraphs don't match the thesis, if you think there's a different argument being presented, then you've got a problem and you need to tweak something. Sometimes it's easier to change the thesis statement to match the body paragraphs than it is to rework an entire paper to match a thesis statement. But if you're passionate about the thesis statement and it's something that you need, then you may have to go back and revise your entire paper to match that thesis statement. So that's why this is the stage where we make sure that everything matches up, that everything makes sense. I always say let somebody else review your work. A peer review is always great during this time frame. Get as much feedback as you can. You know, you can talk to a classmate, a buddy, someone who's well versed, and you explain what you're needing. The tutoring center at most colleges will do this if you go in and tell them what you're looking for. But always remember, no matter how much feedback you get, you're still the writer, you still have control of your paper, and you have to make the ultimate decision of changing what's been suggested. Okay? So you're not bound to making changes, but you have to make the choices of what changes are right for you or right for the essay, because not everybody's going to give you the best information. Once you've completed that revising stage, then you can move into the editing phase. And when you edit, that comes at the end after you've revised, after you're ready. This paper is ready to go. Now it's time to all I need to do is edit, and that means I just need to check my surface errors, the errors that are on the surface. The content is okay because that's what the revising stage takes care of. Now I'm looking for the editing where I'm going to make sure my spelling is correct, the grammar looks all right, punctuation is in place, Nothing's missing. I'm going to check for wordiness and clarity. I want to make sure that the sentence that I intended to write here is the sentence that appears, that there's not a word missing, something's been left out, someone might misunderstand. That's where you check that. You also want to check for the wordiness. You don't want to be a wordy writer. An example of this that I always use for wordiness is people who enjoy using due to the fact that. Due to the fact that is a very wordy statement and can almost always be replaced with because. And if one word can replace 4, 5, or 6 words, then always try to do that. So due to the fact that, move away from that, just use because. I think sometimes people think they're sounding more technical or more official when they say due to the fact that, but it's most often a very wordy statement. Here are some points to remember as you review the writing process and begin your own journey. Always allow yourself adequate time for planning and pre-writing. Those are very important stages. Write as many drafts as you need. Never worry about surface errors until the editing phase begins. Changing the errors, the surface errors, that's not important until the very last. And revising does not mean editing for errors. Just keep that in mind. Changing your content. Editing actually means working on the surface errors. So revising is changing content. Editing is improving the surface errors. If you got all this down, you should have a successful experience with the writing process and should be well on your way to writing a nice paper.